The Korean War is often remembered for its politics and its bitter stalemate, but, one of its most consequential revelations had nothing to do with diplomacy or front lines. It exposed how modern militaries, fresh from World War II, had quietly grown overconfident in their own technology. In Korea's winters, sophisticated equipment failed in ways planners had not anticipated, and honestly, soldiers were forced to rely on older, almost forgotten practices to meet basic needs. One of those needs was heat, not for comfort but for survival. The most reliable solution did not come from factories or supply depots. It came from scrap metal, shaped by hand into a crude tin lid stove that worked when gas stoves did not. If you value this kind of overlooked military history and, the practical lessons it still offers, subscribe to Echoes of Valor. This channel is built for viewers who want depth, not just simplified narratives. The persistence of this improvised stove across multiple wars tells us, honestly, something uncomfortable about how armies prepare for hardship. By 1950, the US military believed it had solved many of the logistical problems that plagued earlier wars. Korea dismantled that confidence quickly. Extreme cold rendered fuel systems unreliable. Pressurized gas stoves struggled to vaporize fuel. Valves froze, seals failed, and ignition became unpredictable. This was not merely an inconvenience. Soldiers depended on heat to prepare rations, melt snow, and prevent the cascading effects of cold stress. That gap was filled the same way it had been filled before, through improvisation rooted in World War II experience. So, a flattened tin lid, or even a ration can top, was shaped into a shallow burner. Small perforations, or sometimes just folded edges, controlled the airflow, Fuel was simply poured right into the container and lit. It's honestly a marvel of simplicity. What made this stove burn hotter than, many modern designs wasn't efficiency in the laboratory sense. It was actually unrestricted combustion. In environments where, frankly, fuel availability mattered less than reliability, this trade-off really made sense. Soldiers needed water boiled now, not optimized over time. World War II, taught soldiers that simplicity really reduced dependence on logistics. The tin lid stove, it really embodied this philosophy. It accepted dirty fuel, it functioned in wind and cold, and honestly, it could be rebuilt from refuse when damaged. Gas stoves, they failed not because they were poorly designed, but because they assumed stability. So, cold thickens fuel and stiffens components. Exhaustion reduces fine motor control. And stress, it punishes complex procedures. The tin lid stove assumed none of these things would go right, and that is exactly why it worked. This difference, reflects a broader tension in military design. Systems optimized for efficiency under ideal conditions often fail abruptly under stress, but systems optimized for degradation continue to function, albeit imperfectly. The Korean War forced militaries to confront the cost of forgetting informal knowledge. One of the quiet consequences of Korea was a renewed emphasis on cold weather testing and survival training. Yet, the tin lid stove itself never became standardized. It just kind of remained unofficial, passed along through experience rather than manuals. And honestly, this is part of why it remains so obscure. What does survive, though, are the principles behind them: redundancy, adaptability, and, a real tolerance for misuse. The stove's psychological impact was just as important as its physical output. Heat stabilized routines. A reliable flame meant hot food, warm drinks, and, for a moment, a brief restoration of normalcy. The tin lid stove offered certainty. It did not surprise its users. In environments defined by uncertainty, that reliability carried weight. Modern survival culture unknowingly inherits this wartime logic. What is frequently lost is the context that produced these ideas. They were not born from leisure or experimentation. They emerged from necessity under conditions where failure carried consequences. Understanding this lineage really matters because it grounds preparedness in reality rather than, say, just aesthetics or whatever happens to be trendy at the moment. Remembering small tools, well, it changes how we understand wars. Military history often privileges strategy and leadership, but wars are honestly endured through countless small acts of maintenance and adaptation. The tin lid stove, for example, represents that layer of history. Why does this lesson still matter, you might wonder? The tin lid stove doesn't outperform modern gas stoves because it's, superior technology. It outperforms them because it is honest about failure. If you value in-depth historical analysis that examines what is often ignored, go ahead and subscribe to Echoes of Valor and share this video with others who care about understanding the past with seriousness and respect.